Okay, well, I hope everyone is back by now. We're excited to have a really good panel to share with everyone. We've got Troy Charsley, Manager of Mine Electrical from Hatch, as the moderator, and panelist Ron Miller, Director of Asset Management with Newmont, James Coe, who's the Chief Engineer with Komatsu, Steve Homick, Mobile Equipment Specialist from Sudbury Integrated Nickel Operations, a Glencore company. And please, as we've gone through the presentations thus far, write your comments in the side window, and we'll look to bring them up and ask them of the panelists. And we'll be doing this for this. This is going to last about 45 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next exercise. So, Troy, please take it away.
Hello, everybody, and good morning, or whatever time of the world you're in. Good day. I guess one of the, from Nick Gardner's presentation that he made and some of the quick comments that we saw, we certainly saw that developing the business case for battery electric vehicles and mine electrification are hot topics for many mining companies and certainly the support industry for mining around the world. I think this really leads well into our panel discussion, which is hopefully to try to talk about some of the key drivers of a business case and key focus areas of a business case that will support and drive future mining operations. From there, I guess what we can do is just with our panelists, maybe a quick 1-minute introduction from each of them to make an opening statement on what they feel about some of the key drivers are for the business case, and then we can start asking some questions. So perhaps we can start with Steve Homick from Glencore. Could you introduce yourself and maybe make an opening statement on some key drivers for the business case in battery electric vehicles?
Yeah, certainly. Hello, everyone. Steve Holmick from Sudbury Integrated Nickel Operations in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. Brief bio. Started off my maintenance and more specifically maintenance career in the underground coal mining industry on the east coast of Australia. Then progressed or moved across to the west coast, where I was involved with the hard rock mining industry, maintenance, both surface and underground. And then approximately 21 years ago, I decided to move to Sudbury, and eventually, after about a 5-year hiatus, got back into the mining industry here, maintenance based as well. So yeah, so as far as drivers, etc., for BEVs, I can speak more on the maintenance side of things. Obviously, without maintenance, you're not going to have equipment operating in the mines. I've been fortunate to be involved with a startup project about 10, 11 years ago now, where was involved with the design of mobile equipment shops, etc., and the processes involved regarding that. Diesel back then, but now getting involved with the BEV fleet, design of shops, processes, etc., etc. So questions regarding that, I'd be happy to answer for sure. So welcome, and I hope we get some great questions and the answers to your questions from this panel discussion.
Okay, thanks, Steve. James Coe from Komatsu, would you care to give yourself an introduction? Is James on with us? Marcus, have you seen James with us, or?
I have not seen James yet.
Oh, okay. Well, we might be short a panelist. Ron Miller, we'll pick up with you then from Newmont Mines.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being on the panel. And my background is that my whole career has been in energy, from renewables to structurally designing power plants, to oil and gas, to mining. So my focus is really how do we as a mining company, Newmont, reduce our energy consumption, cost, and emissions. And I think that's the real driver for us, is that these are things that we are trying to do. And I think the driver for the battery electric is really the environmental side. There is a business case, obviously the economics, but I think how do we, as a mining industry, become better stewards of the environment and reduce our emissions with the ability to get into mining districts around the world to run our operations. I think that the reputational risk that we have in not doing that is getting steeper and steeper in our business.
Okay. Marcus, any word from James, or is he? Are you able to try to reach him on the side privately?
Yeah, we're going to try to do that in the meantime.
Okay.
But it's go ahead. I think we got a great panel anyway. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
James was planning to hop on just in time for the panel, so I told him that we were starting, and he should be on any time now.
okay. So as soon as we see him, we'll give him a chance to introduce. But I guess we can start in it, and certainly to people who are listening in, by all means, please type in any questions, and we'll try to get some of those questions to the panelists to discuss. I guess I'll start with a first question to maybe get some of the flow going, and I think certainly the earlier presentation kind of leaded into this a little bit, which is of course within the battery electric fleet versus some of the operating costs that you carry in a business case. I think there's certainly some, and with every business case, it's always true that there's always trade-offs between capital expenditure and operating expenses. One of the questions I like to put out to the panel is what are some of the key considerations, Capex versus Opex, that you can put forward in developing an electrification and battery electric business case. Steve or Ron, one of you want to?
I'll start off there. I think one of the keys is just like renewables, where it's front loaded with Capex, in project year zero, and low, fuel costs for the balance of your entity. The battery electric vehicles, you have the 30% increased cost. I think you're balancing that Capex versus obviously lower diesel costs, the ventilation costs, whether they're air conditioning costs, and also carbon tax costs. So those last three are basically, I'll call it revenue streams or savings streams in future years that balances out that extra Capex for a battery electric vehicle in making the economics work. Because I think that's really key, is all those three factors or streams of revenue / savings provide the business case, the financial backing for making something like this. But I think the safety is another key issue, having less emissions down underground. I think that's for the mining business, having a safer mine, in addition to there's a payback for reduced costs. I think additionally, one of the key criteria that I would look at as you look at electrification, and I'll speak from a strictly energy perspective, but look at your cost of electricity to the mine site versus the cost of diesel. Because if you really want to cull out the lowest of low-hanging fruit where to electrify, it would be those mines preferentially that have the highest diesel costs and lowest electricity costs. Your trading high cost and replacing it with a lower cost energy source, whether that electricity comes from solar or wind or natural gas, other less environmentally challenging, I'll say, sources. So I think that's something to be considered as you're looking at electrification from just strictly energy economics.
Some good points, Ron. Steve, do you have anything to add to that, or any thoughts on trade-offs between CapEx and OpEx?
I mean, there's many ways to slice and dice that, as we all know. But getting maybe talking more about the total cost of ownership. We can play with the numbers. We can get the numbers from the OEMs. We can look at the electricity versus diesel and model that till our heart's content. But bottom line, I think we need to look at the overall picture. And if someone's looking at a BEV implementation short-term solution, I don't think it's viable. You definitely need to look at it as a long-term proposal and possible solution. I'll just speak from a personal perspective. I ended up buying an EV myself to drive around a couple of years ago, and went through that justification process myself. And I know it's not directly related to mining equipment, but I like to talk about it anyway. And sure, the capital expenditure was higher than a gas or diesel vehicle, but my operating expenses are virtually nothing in comparison. And operating expenses also includes maintenance, where there virtually is none. So depending upon the BEV configuration, etc., you may have certain elements of maintenance still applicable, but you may greatly reduce your maintenance costs as well. So all those have to be considered when you're looking at mine design and the potential for BEV implementation. One of the spin-offs I talk about as well is the reduction on the usage of our secondary gas vehicle. Not only fuel costs, but also maintenance costs on that, because my wife wants to drive a BEV whenever she can. So, and reports I've heard that from various sources that once someone starts driving a BEV, that's all they want to drive. Whether it be surface or underground. So there may not be some immediately known positives that can be explored or calculated, but some of the spin-offs are silently significant when you add everything up and actually get out in the real world and experience it.
Okay. Just in the chat window, I think John Tree made a bit of a point, and it's just not about capital expense, but there's also the concept of capital savings, and perhaps it's a good point to talk a little bit about where, not just in the capital cost side, but capital savings, where with a BEV, some key drivers to capital savings might be. I haven't heard if we've had Joe connect yet. Steve or Ron, you want to jump in and throw some thoughts in about capital savings for battery electric vehicles?
Yeah, Troy, I'll tell you, I think like everything, you have to put all the CapEx, OpEx numbers on the table. That John, your comment about the fuel storage, handling of fuel, refueling vehicles, hey, there's a lot of both CapEx, OpEx included in that. On the flip side, I think you want to look at, well, we have battery storage, recharging, some CapEx for those, whether you want to do the fast charge or actually replace batteries, a battery pack out of a electric truck, electric vehicle at a mine. So there are trade-offs. I think The one thing that comes to mind, I think, in a lot of the energy sector right now, whether you're dealing with, generation, solar, wind, energy storage is really the holy grail of the energy sector in my mind, because as we get trying to drive down the cost of energy through better technologies, you have to have some way of basically bridging the gap. Sunny day, windy day, well, it's 2:30 in the morning. There's no sun and there's no wind. So energy storage, whether it be battery, for mobile applications, or bulk storage, to basically take cheap solar energy, cheap wind energy, and deliver it to a mine in the middle of the night. That's really key, I think. So I think when you look at all the costs, I think we all have to be realist, make sure we're not trying to fulfill a narrative, but to say, hey, well, let's open it up to scrutiny, make sure we've covered all the costs of both technologies. But I think one key is finding lower cost energy to use it more efficiently. And once again, there's shelf life for battery storage systems, for mobile applications, just like anything else.
Steve, do you have anything to add, or?
Yeah, from once again maintenance perspective and talking about shop design and so forth, diesels versus electric, capital savings. I mean, your shop infrastructure. When it comes down to lubrication, for example, and it all depends on what fleet you're running and the configuration of those machines as well. The drive configurations really determines how the shop infrastructure and maintenance strategy has to be set up. Some equipment you're probably going to see a significant maintenance saving. Once again, based upon primarily the drive configuration and the application of that machine. But when you look at a jumbo, for example, the majority of maintenance work on a jumbo is primarily the front end, hoses, feeds, etc., etc. Very little maintenance on the drivetrain. So when you're comparing a BEV jumbo to a diesel jumbo, you're probably not going to see that much difference in operational expense or maintenance expense, given that potentially all you're eliminating is the diesel engine. But yeah, as far as setting your shop up, if you're going full BEV, you have the potential to reduce a significant portion of your consumables as such, and hence the delivery mechanism for those consumables as well, storage mechanisms for those consumables. So a lot of it comes down to equipment you're procuring and the mine design. So from a capital, there's potential for savings, definitely. Yes, you do have your charging infrastructure out in the mine, and potential trickle charging, we'll call it, in the shop during maintenance. But that's probably from a maintenance and shop infrastructure perspective, that's probably insignificant in comparison to the other consumable requirements that you need. And having said that, you're still going to require consumables for sure. You're still going to require certain lubricants, but I think on a far reduced basis in comparison to a diesel operated fleet.
Okay, Owen Morton has made a comment in the chat window. I'll just try, he's a fairly lengthy one, so I'll just try to quickly paraphrase, but he's talking about total cost of ownership as being part of the Capex, Opex decision, and where some of that lies. One question is regarding towards total cost of ownership is the concept of owning vehicles versus leasing vehicles. Within the battery electric do you gentlemen have any thoughts on where leasing versus owning plays into total cost of ownership in the battery electric market, considering not just the vehicle, but as well the batteries themselves. Steve? Oh,
That's
yeah,
a
Ron?
great question. I'll tell you, I think there's so many factors that go into it, just like rent versus own of anything, of any asset. I think one thing that we ought to consider, once again, I'm not trying to be selective on one side of the fence or the other, but in areas where technology is changing very fast, and I think that's what we're seeing in the energy sector, it may be advantageous to lease for a period of time. Just like a lot of I'll just speak from solar and wind, it's come down very quickly on capital costs. Then at some point you get to a plateau. These energy costs, the density of batteries, I don't think we've seen any kind of a plateau as far as a cost. And from that standpoint only, it may be better to be able to lease to allow a way to get into the next technology that is even lower cost, more efficient, more dense batteries, etc. Once again, it's more economics, looking and balancing out the technology, the speed at which technology changes. So do you want to own a truck that's got a 20-year life where, hey, the truck technology is changing every 5 years or 10 years? Same kind of thought process there. Do we want to be changing out and taking advantage of better technologies on a shorter time frame? Once again, everyone can do their own. There's probably not any perfect right answer, Troy, but once again, the economics, there's plenty of opportunity to look at the economics ad nauseum, I think.
Just to piggyback there. Lease versus buy. I think the comments are true there. One of the grey areas and one of the I guess unknowns is around the batteries, and a number of the OEMs are now looking at battery as a service, or essentially, if we want to simplify it, a lease program for batteries themselves. So the advantages of that from an end user perspective is the risk. Some of the advantages, not all. There may be disadvantages as well, but is the risk regarding battery reliability is now not upon the end user, and as was stated, the technology is constantly changing. So, you buy a battery now, in a year, 2 years' time, it's probably going to be outdated. So one of the opportunities that's afforded with leasing of a battery or battery as a service is keeping up with technology, potentially. And even the machines themselves. Once again, revert back to my personal experience. I was tossing between buying versus leasing. I'm normally a guy that buys, but leasing just made sense given the forever changing technology, etc., etc. So once again, it comes down to the study, the operational needs, what's considered most viable for your operation, through all the studies, even risk assessments have a major part in that decision making process. There's not a one answer fits all kind of thing.
Of course.
I just wanted to let you know that Peter Wan has offered to join the panel, since I don't think James will be able to join.
Yeah. Okay. I saw that on the side there. I was going to give Peter Wan a chance to introduce himself from Tech. Peter, are you on the call?
I am. Hi.
Hi.
Peter Wan here from Tech. I work in our technology and innovation group and leading our low carbon economy theme. So our push to decarbonisation, and obviously fleet electrification is a very large part of that. It's interesting. It's a different, slightly different to the gentlemen that have been talking to date, in that we are 100% surface mining operations, and so even less equipment. In fact, no equipment available yet in the heavy mining space. And so the business case and working with OEMs and others in industry collaboratively is a big part of the effort at the moment.
Okay. I'll throw another question in here. We'll move away from the Capex, Opex, and perhaps get into sustainability part of the business case. As we know, the companies today certainly have certainly as part of their overall models and value statements, as we see in many corporations, that they carry a social responsibility as part of their overall business plan. And part of that social responsibility is sustainable operations within the world. As we know, a lot of the drivers and conversations around battery electric vehicles and mine electrification is to look to reduce greenhouse gases and movements towards carbon neutrality. How does a mine factor in the electrification benefits in their business cases for offsetting greenhouse gas emissions? Peter, seeing as you're new to start the conversation, maybe I'll throw that at you to get us started on that.
Sure. So half of our operations are in British Columbia, and we do have a carbon tax in place. So in some ways, having a carbon tax can be both a blessing and a curse. And in this perspective, it can be a little bit of a blessing in that there is a benefit to going to BEVs to get away from that carbon tax. So we do factor that in, and we do look at what the long-term expectation will be for a carbon tax, not just in BC, but in our other jurisdictions as well. But from a sustainability perspective, the key factors that are going to come into play are the GHG reductions and what our commitments are that have been publicly announced. But then on the business case side of it, what can we do around the cost of a fuel replacement? So diesel versus whatever your cost of electricity is. And if we have operations where we are still on diesel generation, for example, what's our long-term view on that generation, and what's future generations of fuel source and energy cost? So they're both big factors in the business case for sustainability.
Ron, it looks like you're about to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think the continuing drive in the mining industry to basically fuel switch, as you can, diesel to natural gas, diesel to solar or wind, or other less environmentally harmful generation sources. I think that's something that we ought to be doing, not only just the environmental side, but the cost. And I think I'll go back to this reputational value of electrification. I guess being an engineer and a business person, I always look at it like dollars and cents, very rational. And I guess in my career, I've really seen a market change in like the investors, BlackRock, these funds. They are really driving the train to a large extent to say, hey, it's great that your rate of return, but what are you doing about the environment? And I think when you look at from a financial stock value, more people wanting to buy mining stocks or mining service company stocks. Hey, we want to see this environmental stewardship. What are you doing in that area that will say this company is differentiated from another, and they deserve either a premium or more people that will be driven to buy that stock for that reason alone, not the rate of return on the investment, the dividends. But I think you're seeing a market change in the industry. And I think it's, once again, it has to pan out economically, but I think those things are not to be, I'll say, diminished or discounted. I think we're seeing change, even from a dollars and cents kind of a guy like me, seeing the conversion. It really is happening. We can argue at the rate that it's happening, but I think you're seeing that in the industry today.
That's good. Steve, do you have anything to add to those comments?
No, I think Ron covered it there from my perspective.
Okay.
Sorry, before you go on, Troy, I think Ron has nailed a really good point there, and there's some other elements to that as well in terms of the product and green copper or copper mark as it's being established, and other products. If you can demonstrate the low carbon footprint of your product, through blockchain or whatever other methodologies, there's going to be real value in that as we move forward as well. And so, again, motivation for BEVs and reducing our carbon footprint in the production.
It's a good thought. We're getting down to about just about 12 minutes left until 11 o'clock. So the conversation on the side window, there's a couple of points talking towards mine design consideration. And I think perhaps one of the things I would maybe throw out there for discussion is, how do we within a business case try to compare trade-offs of electric vehicles in moving ore and bringing ore to more traditional electrified systems such as conveyors or hoisting or those type systems where we have something that is already electric. How does the new technology of battery electric vehicles either support or perform? How does it play into the business case? Steve, you want to maybe start that one off?
Well, I can maybe add a couple of comments just from my limited experience with mine design as such. But once again, I think it really gets down to well, first of all, what's your ore body like, and how do you design it around that? Yeah, conveyors make sense if you've got the I believe a fairly shallow mine, elongated ore body probably makes sense. But when you start talking about drifts and inclines, declines, etc., it's hard to run a conveyor vertically, and I don't mean that in a realistic sense. But so BEVs they require a whole redesign essentially. Most of us know that hauling fully loaded uphill in a BEV like you do with the diesel is going to significantly reduce your available runtime for that truck or scoot. So you turn things upside down. You haul down ramp, and you capitalize upon that energy that you can now gain, and then you tram empty up ramp. So once again, it's hard to give one answer that satisfies every requirement, but there's options, and that's the beauty about it. There are options. I don't think anyone's saying that the BEVs are the only option going forward, but there are significant potential for BEVs to help out a company going forward with their bottom line profit, and also primarily safety as well. And that's a whole nother discussion in itself, or can be. But we all want mines to be safe. We all want equipment to be safe. And with the technology now that you can incorporate a lot more readily on BEVs, it leads itself or lends itself towards that safety aspect and inherent profitability in the end.
Okay, Ron, do you want to carry on the conversation?
Yeah, I'd say I think new mines that we're going to see in the future that start off with a clean sheet of paper, probably going to be obviously cheaper to electrify because you don't have all the other ventilation, other infrastructure, capex, sunk costs that you have in retrofitting a diesel truck, haul truck type of operation to bring the ore to the surface. Those are going to be more costly. And I think, so when you look at electrifying either a hoist, conveyor, or some other, maybe a hybrid, but using electricity, and you're taking out we have to change out the batteries, we have to recharge them on a mobile, you take that out of the equation, it may actually be cheaper, or it may be something, you have to look at the economics, I should state it that way, but the labor of change out, recharge, time of recharging, it's lost productive time, those are all factors that are really key to the economic case to look at. How do you get the ore from down in the underground mine up to the surface? Hey, there's different alternatives. And it may not be electrifying the trucks. It may be, like I say, the hoist, conveyor, a railveyor system. I think you got to look at all those types of technologies to say, what's the lowest total cost of ownership? Like you'd say, a levelized cost of energy. What's the levelized cost of bringing the ore to the surface, and compare it on an even playing field?
Okay, Peter, do you have a point of view on how mine design will impact the business case for battery electric vehicles?
Well, regarding the point of battery electric versus other electric options like conveying, I mean, we see this already in surface mining for sure, and often the consideration between wheeled equipment versus fixed infrastructure really comes down to that flexibility and what's the rate of advance of the mine, and are you bulk versus selective mining. And so, we have some of our mines which are bulk coal operations, and we use electric rope shovels, and that electric infrastructure, makes sense given the productivity that we get from those shovels. And then we have other more selective base metals operations where we're using hydraulic shovels because we can't. The cost implications of the electric infrastructure just don't stack up. So, and as we think about BEVs now, we have to think that most of our BEVs today are going to be going into brownfields operations, and so we have to think about how they match up with existing long life assets. So, if we have a rope shovel that's got an 80-ton bucket, and we're wanting to put in a fleet of smaller BEVs, for example, BEV haul trucks, we've got to think about that matching piece as well. So, particularly for brownfields operations, we're not going to be able to fully optimize what we get from the BEVs, but we have to be able to recognize that long run as we can change mine designs, do as Steve says, and look for opportunities to hold down ramp rather than up ramp. That's going to take significant changes. It's probably going to be best fitted to a greenfields operation, but you're not going to put BEVs into a greenfields operation without first validating them in a brownfields deal.
Mm-hmm. Good. The good points. We've got just over 4 minutes left until we hit 11 o'clock. I think this is just a very small, quick one. Adrian Helm has just asked a very interesting question. And his question is, do you think switching to BEV will make mining as a more attractive workplace to future generations and people coming out of school, as opposed to the traditional mining methods, and how are people continuing the mining traditions beyond us in sustainable mining will react to the changes that are before us with battery electric vehicles. I'll leave it open to anyone on the panel.
I'll tell you, Troy, I'll take that one. I'll make a disclaimer. I'm not a visionary, a technology forecaster, but I think some of the things that we're seeing in industry in general with automation, automated like autonomous trucks at different mines around the world, you could see an underground mine in the future where everything is autonomous, which would then change the landscape dramatically, because do we need to ventilate? Do we need to cool? Do we need to all the other things? Because there are no humans in the mine. Once again, this may be way out, but it could be a really big game changer. And the comment about like young engineers, younger people coming into the mining business, perhaps you're just made those jobs not just less, but more interesting. You expanded the scope of that job because a lot of the other things that are being done, you could do with artificial intelligence, autonomous. Perhaps not everything, and it's going to take a lot of change, iterations of change, but that could be something that is out in the future. How far out is always debatable, but hey, who would have thought we have had cell phones that are more powerful than computers in the space program? Anything is possible with the right smart people out there that we have in the world. So,
hey,
yeah, I'd add to that, and I'd say that there's a confluence of technologies that are going to be radically changing the workforce, and roles are going to change significantly as well. Ron touched on automation, but we've got remote operations as well. We've got advanced analytics. These are all going to change very much the nature of the work that people are doing in the operations, and that gamification is going to come in as well. And with that, all of those technologies, we have the potential to change our scope that we're looking at for attracting workers. It's not just going to be the workforce that we've had today. There's going to be potentially shorter shifts and younger people. So potentially women that would otherwise have to leave the workforce to look after children, or parents, I should say, that have to leave the workforce to look after children, have the potential to do work from home like we all are today. So a lot of the roles are going to change, and it's not just BEVs, but just as a little snippet, we have a couple of battery electric buses that commute our workforce to a couple of our mine sites, and the general feedback we get is that they like the electric bus because it's the right thing to do. So I think that mindset is going to help as well.
Okay, everyone, we've reached 11 o'clock, which I believe was our time allotment. Just so that we can wrap up with the three panelists. You want to make a 30-second closing statement, starting with Ron?
Yeah, I think in every industry, you're going to see a lot of change. If you look at the automobile industry, internal combustion engine, the Ford, GMs of the world, you're seeing entries with smaller or fewer moving parts in electric vehicle. You're seeing competitors that they weren't there 10 years ago, and I think very likely you will see the same technological changes, people from different backgrounds in mining that are looking at the same problems, maybe from a different lens, and they may actually change the market as we know it, just like the electric vehicle, the Teslas, the other competitors and entries into the market. So it's a very, I guess, fluctuating, fluid case when you're dealing with technologies that can and are changing very rapidly.
Thank you for that. Peter, thanks for stepping in as a pinch hitter at the last minute. Do you have a closing thought or statement on battery electric vehicles?
Yeah, I think there's a healthy skepticism today about where BEVs are and the business case for them. But, you know, a quote that I often think about is that we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5 years. And I think that's the time frame where we're just going to see this rapid uptake.
Yes, yes. Good thought. Steve, you get the last word.
Great. No, I think just from my experience, both personally and also within the industry, with regards to BEVs and EVs, there's a lot of hesitation, and I think a lot of that hesitation comes from the unknown. We don't really have a huge amount of historical data to pull from. But put that aside, you know, there's all sorts of rumors that go around regarding electric vehicles and BEVs in mines and so forth. But I think a lot of that stems from the lack of education that leads to the lack of understanding. And I think now that we're starting to gain traction within the industry and educate people about what's there, how things work, the pros, the cons, et cetera, naturally comes the understanding and hence the willingness to accept these. I don't like calling them changes, but I like to call them more improvements within the industry. So having said that, yeah, the more we can get people educated about BEVs, I think the industry will just naturally start progressing. Now, as we've said, maybe not the right application for everyone, but the more education we can get out there, the better the understanding and the better possible suitability for each particular end user's application. So, and there's a good forums or formats to start that education process.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We've gone over by a couple of minutes, but I think that was an excellent discussion as a panel for the future of battery electric vehicles and some key thoughts on developing the business case, which is going to be an ongoing development for many of us on the call. Thank you.